Thing is on. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yes, Rahul bhai.
Yes. So, good afternoon to everyone, the faculty for the session, and Girdhar sir and CA Madhvi Trivedi, the dynamic chairman of Ahmedabad branch, CA Harit Dhariwal, the coordinator for the today's session, CA Aman Rathi, and the CA Dilip Chachani, and everyone on this particular platform, welcome you once again. I'll request everyone to put your right hand on the heart for our ICI motto.
य एष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति य एष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति कामं 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 कामपुरुषो पुरुषो निर्मिमाणः निर्मिमाणः तदेव शुक्रं तद्ब्रह्मा तद्ब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते तस्मिन् लोकः शतः सर्वे तदूनात्यकश्चन एतद्वैता 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 एतद्वैता.
Now I'll request the chairman of Ahmedabad branch, C. Harit Dhariwal, to brief about the upcoming events at Ahmedabad branch.
Thank you, Rahul bhai. Very respected faculty, Giridhar sir, who has joined us today, Madhvi ji, who is basically the one who helped us connecting to the sir and for this session. Thank you, Madhvi ji. All the participants who have joined us virtually, and all the participants who are going to listen to us the recorded session once they are listening. A very, very good evening to all of you. Friends, it's a very interesting day today. We just had a meeting with the Honorable Ministry of Law, wherein we had a chance to interact with him as far as the Ahmedabad branch is concerned, and we gave him a lot of important inputs from our side. And after that, we are coming up with this very interesting session, a new opportunity for all of us. I think we are very happy that we could have a session on it as early as in October. Last week only, our president, Honorable Nihar Jambusaria sir, had mentioned that both these areas, the enterprise risk management as well as the business sustainability and responsibility reporting, they are the new areas where chartered accountants can dwell, and they can develop their practice on that area. Hence, we thought of having this session, and I'm sure both the faculties will enrich us with this the newer area of practice, and we all will be able to develop our practice in this area. Coming to the upcoming events, we are having our GST National Conference tomorrow. The registrations are still open. We'll be closing in the evening. We have more than 500 registrations for that conference. So very well received by everyone, and thank you for all your support. We are coming up with a special series on FEMA that will happen somewhere in the mid of November. So do save your dates. We are having a Diwali get together on 17th of November. Again, the details will be out soon. And apart from this, yes, the box cricket is going on. Again, 36 teams, more than 350 players playing daily. It's again a great thing. So those who want to witness some really fast cricket entertainment, come in the evening, 7 to 11. We are there at the Trophies ground at Sindhi Bhuvan Road. Matches are going on. So with this, I once again thank today's speakers for sparing their valuable time. And I would now request Rahul bhai to take the session forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Rishi. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for briefing the activities. Now I'll request CA Aman Rathi to give the brief introduction about today's faculty.
Good evening, everyone. With not taking much time, let me introduce today's faculty, Mr. Nagaraj sir. He is the founding partner of NGMT and Company, and holding a vast experience of 37 years in the field of audit and assurance, internal audit, risk governance, and taxability services. Besides that, he has also served various reputed corporates such as MRF, TVS, Chem, Fab Alkalis, DHCL, Gujarat Tambuza Export, and Al Transim Group of Oman as well. He has also functioned as a CFO, Chief Financial Officer, in the international and national corporates as well. He is also partner in the Pramod Dad and Associates, which is excellent practice from last 27 years in the field of direct taxation. And second faculty of today's session, Madhvi ma'am, is also having a very good and brilliant experience in the field of corporate taxation of 16 years. She is also having experience in the SOP documentation, process optimization, as well as in business and financial analytics. Ma'am has also served in the ENY and PwC, along with the corporate such as Airtel, Cadila, and Aris Life Science as well. With this brief synopsis, the stage is all yours.
Thank you very much.
Sir, you can share your presentation now.
Yes. Is it visible? Is it visible, the screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the nice introduction. Good evening to everyone. I would like to thank each one of you for devoting your valuable time, sparing especially the late evening hours, and to attend this particular program. And my special thanks to Mr. Harith, Chairman of the Ahmedabad branch, Mr. Rahul, Chairman of the CP committee, and Ms. Anjali, the Secretary, and other committee members of Ahmedabad branch, giving us an opportunity to share more insights into the recent regulatory changes which have become applicable during the current financial year. We are aware that the new regulatory changes, new provision, new compliances are getting introduced by various statutes regularly for past, I would say, the post second wave. We are also aware that the regulatory agencies are so active and expressing a sense of urgency, bringing in various changes, and the intention, the legislative intent is very clear to align ourselves with the global standards. In fact, probably, I mean, all of us spend our day with anxiety, looking for new changes, new amendments, and of course, without losing the time, various professional groups, they keep exchanging the updates, and immediately, I think, without even wasting a minute, they transmit the extract of notifications and the circulars, and also the implications of such notifications and circulars. And apart from this, the way our esteemed institution responds to these regulatory changes are also commendable. And to make a special reference, just now Mr. Harith mentioned what are the new programs, new initiatives which Ahmedabad branch is going to initiate in the month of coming November post Diwali. So I really appreciate the efforts and the way Mr. Harith conducts and arranges the various professional programs as a part of either study group meetings or CPE initiatives, and the knowledge sharing process through expert faculty members is definitely going to be beneficial for all of us. Keeping the above facts in the background, the recent changes which happened in the listing obligations and disclosure requirements, of course, all of us know that it is extremely large and vast subject to have a detailed review of all the amendments, all the changes and the implications which have been brought out by the regulatory agencies. We have just picked up two regulations for today's deliberations, which definitely I'm of the opinion that it's going to definitely go a long way in as far as the corporate compliances and the disclosures are concerned. One is the Regulation 21 covering the enterprise risk management, and the Regulation 34 which covers the improved version of business responsibility report, which was earlier being followed by corporates. Now it is getting renamed with more improved disclosures, qualitative disclosures, and both quantitative disclosures, business responsibility and sustainability reporting. Now, to take you through the Regulation 21, which highlights the new changes in the risk management systems applicable to top 1,000 listed companies in terms of market capitalization. And we can certainly make out the intention of this regulation is very clear, to make the risk management system followed by the corporates very robust and very effective. Just to give a brief the historical background about how this enterprise risk management got evolved. All of us, definitely, we at one point of time, we must have carried out a basic internal audit of the traditional internal audit, which meant to be covering transactional reviews, transactional verification, process reviews, system reviews, and internal controls, effectiveness, and various compliances of various regulatory applicable to various corporates, procedural evaluation, policies formulated by the company. It was being carried out generally as a part of internal audit process and internal audit program. And there was no mention of any specialization in the complete process. Of course, the departure from the traditional internal audit and getting into the process of specialization, I would say, happened when the new Companies Act 2013 got introduced. It was certainly a game changer, which brought in radical changes in terms of controls and governance aspects. The traditional internal audit, which was hitherto practiced, got broken into various areas of specialization and sub-specialization, which probably your internal control systems, financial reporting, internal control systems over financial reporting, all emerged out of the specialization which was brought into the internal audit function. Apart from this, we all know that even our board and the independent directors committees were also mandated to play an effective role in implementing these provisions. Now, with this background, I cover this enterprise risk management broadly, the factors which affect the risk assessment procedures, and how your enterprise risk assessment now embraces the governance, risk, and compliance framework. What are the regulative perspective? Why this risk assessment has to be carried out? Is it merely because the regulation or regulatory authorities want it, or it has any inherent benefits as far as the organization is concerned? And how the risk management process gets executed? What are the deliverables coming out of this risk management initiatives? And what are the broad category of risks, both in terms of entity and also process-wise? And what sort of record keeping we have to maintain as far as this particular assessment is concerned? It has been mandated to maintain risk registers, metrics, and the impact assessment of this risk mitigation plan, mitigation assessments. So all these things were just, I'm going to take you through the process. Apart from the general risk, what we see in the organization, I'm just making a passing reference about the fraud risk assessment and the cyber risk exposures, which currently keeping the corporates on their toes. Of course, these two risks themselves are very specialized subjects to cover, but I will just make a mention about how these risks are also affecting the organization in the long run. Now, what exactly the definition of risk? I think we generally we are aware that the risks are basically coming out of an element of uncertainty, whether the actions are controllable or uncontrollable. There is an element of uncertainty about the risk, and how the risk services help various stakeholders to comply with the regulatory requirements, and also, as I mentioned earlier, how these risk assessments help the entities both to assess the organization level risks and also function wise risks. It also it is not enough if only the risks are assessed without the mitigation plan and without mitigation solutions. We also have to establish the mitigation monitoring and also create opportunities out of these risks. And we all know that risk management is not a departmental function, but the entire organization has to work towards the objective of creating a risk management or risk mitigation environment. And of course, definitely, as mentioned earlier, there is also a strict compliance enforcement by regulators and stakeholders forces corporates to demonstrate better discipline, control, and responsibility, and how they are actually converting the risk into opportunities. Because we all know that the risk basically it denotes some sort of the adverse factors or the negative factors, but it is not so. I will try to explain in the coming slides how the risk also can be beneficial to the organization. Now, of course, we all know that there are the various categories of risks which are now being assessed by the organizations, whether it's financial, commercial, operational, regulatory, fraud. I will take you through the various categories of risks and also the impact arising out of those risks. Now, in terms of the current context, because whatever I mentioned was more of a theoretical and which was there in existing. Now, the perception about the risk has undergone a sea change for past couple of years. Now, so many uncertainties all of us have seen in past couple of years, which has affected organization across. I mean, there are very few exceptions which the organization have been able to sail through these risks and come out successful. And the key risks which probably organization is facing today, I'm broadly categorizing under the following categories. One is the what we call the risk of survival during Black Swan event. And Black Swan event, a very general explanation would be Black Swan is an unprecedented, I would say unpredictable, rather unpredictable event which is beyond anybody's control, which was not expected at all, and which has a potential to affect severely the organization, the capability to perform. It doesn't happen every now and then. It is not frequent. It happens very rarely, but when it happens with an extreme severe impact and widespread. It is absolutely widespread. It doesn't stay with one organization. It spreads across all the organization, all the segments. I think the best example all of us know is the COVID, which is very popularly termed as a Black Swan event. I will just try to take little more. I'll explain little more into this particular event in the subsequent slide. Further, as far as the current context of risk perception is concerned, it doesn't come in what you call in silos. It comes together. It doesn't come. The frequency of the occurrence of risk also is not going to. It's not going to be predefined. It may happen every month. It may happen every quarter, and it may be seasonal. We don't know the occurrence, the frequency of occurrence, and how it affects the organization. Yes, how the capacity and capability to face this risk and how the organization is equipped to handle this risk is definitely a test which organization has to put to test, because organization which had some hesitation, some reservations in making investments to develop a robust risk management process are definitely were very badly impacted for past couple of years. And the organization which had a robust system in place, the capability to withstand the uncertainties and the risks definitely proved to be much better than organization which did not have any system in place. I would definitely put two questions now after understanding the current context of the risk perception. See, how do we really see the risk? Is it very dangerous? Is it very negative? Or it gives, as I explained earlier, whether it is giving an opportunity for us to improve. Because it is normally said that every risk and every bad experience is definitely can be converted into an opportunity. And so many organizations have definitely adopted this principle, and they have converted, I would say, the risks and threats into opportunities, and they have survived. And they have survived, I would say, making handsome gains. So, another question is whether these risks, keeping the promoters and the organization awake all through the night. These are the two, I would say, the questions which we have to put to ourselves before we further deliberate how these risks are going to impact the organization. As I was mentioning earlier, see, there are also positive risks which organization will definitely experience in the years in the past and also in the years to come. Because if these risks are managed effectively, probably it could result in a breakthrough of ideas, business efficiencies, new opportunities, and it may enhance value to the stakeholders. It is only a positive mindset which uh, which will probably give you an opportunity to bring in improvements and efficiencies rather than considering these risks as an impediment to the business. Because every risk definitely will have certain mitigation measures, certain process to be put in place, certain strengthening of the internal systems. Once we counter the risks, definitely there is a very probability of these risks turning into, I would say, an opportunity. As I was mentioning in the previous slide about the Black Swan event, specifically with reference to COVID-19, because we all know that, yes, definitely having a ERM system, I think would not have prevented the spread of COVID across the country, affecting everyone. But only thing is, an effective management system, risk management system, would have definitely given strength and given a stable platform for organization to definitely get over the impact of COVID-19 and also minimize the magnitude of COVID-19. And definitely many organizations have done that. Many organizations, I have live examples of even of course certain specific sectors benefited from the COVID impact, especially the healthcare, pharma, and I would say the raw material for pharma, essential commodities. All these industries definitely it was I would say a gold mine for so those organizations. But even other segments also having a robust system in place and proper controls and mitigation measures, they were able to definitely face these unpredictable, unprecedented impact of COVID. I'm just moving to the next concept of how exactly you should have a framework of risk management in the organization. Very general, I think. Definitely I would say the framework definitely covers the internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, board and committees, management and employees, everyone. So when this framework is going to impact one and all, that definitely it has to flow from the top. The tone and conduct at the top only sets the entire process in place, which will help to define a code of conduct and policies, risk management framework, risk management reporting structure, and the mitigation and monitoring mechanisms to get implemented in the organization. What are the basic factors which would definitely impact the risk assessment? Because it's not a very easy process to start and take it through. Because most, as far as my experience is concerned, most of the owners or promoters will take a stand that no one will understand better than them the risk exposures and how it is going to impact the business. Very, I would say, narrow definition of risk as far as how their promoters perceive the impact of risk. It definitely takes a lot of efforts and pains for us, for professionals to explain how the risk, what are the various categories of risk, how these risks are going to impact, whether it's going to be having financial impact, whether it's going to have a impact on the controls, whether it's going to be system improvement. See, it doesn't mean that risk always has a financial impact, and it is going to create loss to the organization. So that understanding and terms of understanding have to be widened. The risk also can be anything else. Okay, it can come in any form, which definitely it takes promoters to understand. And once you make them understand the concept, then definitely yes, the doors are open for professionals like us to give a valuable contribution and also take the organization through the troubled waters, holding their hands. Okay, so the basic factors which will affect the risk assessment to start is, one is the management expectations and objectives, as I explained to you, and setting up a proper risk committee structure and appointing an exclusive officer, which definitely now has been mandated by the regulation, and how the reporting is to be done to the various committees and the board, and how exactly the assessment to be carried out, what are going to be the impact, whether financially or non-financially, and what sort of response you will get from various functional heads. Because again, it is not going to be just a risk department exercise like in internal audit department like in the previous years to have the assessment, but the inputs have to come from the various functional heads, and they don't have to they don't have to really refer only the problems, and also they have to definitely give the solutions, since they are going to have the functional expertise. That is definitely how effectively the functional heads are going to be participating in the process. It broadly affects the risk assessment process as such. And again, these are all interrelated. This one, the attempt has to be not from the point of view of just meeting the regulatory requirements, but also from the point of view of meeting the organization requirements, and it has to definitely bring some benefits to the organization. Otherwise, organization is not going to be definitely, I would say, influenced by the theoretical risk assessment what we normally do. And of course, the business environment also sets the tone for the right risk assessment to be put in the system. One small conceptual clarity I would like to definitely share with my fraternity. One is there is the terms internal financial controls and enterprise risk management are loosely referred, and they seem to be conveying the same meaning in terms of their scope and the deliverables. But there is definitely a much larger, I would say, the wider scope coverage for the ERM, because ERM covers external risks also, whereas internal financial controls are mainly covering the process-wise and entity level controls within the organization. And it is IFC is more process-related risk, whereas ERM is also a process for setting up a strategy across the enterprise with proper mitigation plan to be put in place. And of course, definitely IFC acts as a complementary, I would say supplementary and complementary support to the ERM framework, because without having the internal financial control systems in place, the ERM framework will not be successful. Coming to the regulatory perspective, which I mentioned in the introductory paragraph, the 2013 Companies Act is definitely brought in a lot of, I think, the changes in terms of governance and controls. And first thing is the responsibility of board is squarely put as far as Section 134 is concerned, where the board definitely has to report development and implementing the risk management policy, and they have to identify the various risks and which probably board may take note whether whether it's going to threaten the existence of the company. Audit committee, again, yes, definitely they also have a role to play as far as the effective risk management systems and internal financial controls to put in place. Independent directors, they have to satisfy themselves that the system, financial controls, and the system of risk management are robust and defensible. And of course, not the least, class 49 listing agreement, where the risk management committee has to get constituted. The committee's roles and responsibilities have to be defined, and how the process going to be put in place as far as the review and mitigation plans are concerned. All those things are going to be, all these requirements have been defined in the class 49. Now adding more teeth to the existing provisions and the recent amendments which I referred to earlier. The Constitutional Risk Management Committee has been made applicable to top 1,000 listed companies in terms of market capitalization. The composition of the Risk Management Committee has been very clearly defined. 3 members should be there, and at least 1 director should be independent. The role of Risk Management Committee has been specified, and which includes detailed formulation of management policy and monitoring its implementation. It shall put in place procedures to inform board about the risk assessment and minimization mitigation procedures, and these the reports shall be reviewed, and it will be ensured that the management controls the risk through the properly defined framework. And definitely every quarter the reports have to be reviewed by the board, and also the management has to place a risk compliance officer, where the risk assessment every quarter will get documented by way of a risk register, and business risk faced by the company, measures, and how it is impacting the organization, and what are the measures to minimize such risks, and any limitations as far as the organization to face and take the risks. What are the strengths and capacity of the organization to face the risk? All these things have to be documented and presented to the board every quarter by the officer, of course, supported by the committee. Fine. Now, I was mentioning that this risk assessment which is to be done, whether it's only to comply with the regulatory requirements or it offers you something else. Whether it offers management something else. See the various benefits which can come out of the risk assessment, and the setting up a robust risk assessment system in place. It can be tangible, it can be intangible. It can be financial benefits, it can be system improvements. So I will, in the coming slides, I will explain what are going to be the function-wise, category-wise risks, and what sort of benefits can come out of such assessments. Broadly, I think I have mentioned the benefits. It identifies the trouble spots, and it doesn't give any surprise to the management. Management would be prepared themselves to face such eventuality. They will not be taken by surprise, and it's going to be more of proactive measurements which the risk assessment is going to be suggest, instead of reactive and protecting the resources. Because once the proactive measures are not put in place, and later on it may be too late to protect your resources. So it actually gives you an indication, and it gives you, I would say, warning signals, and also it gives you a proactive mechanism for you to protect your resources. It's going to be more automated systems in place rather than manual systems in place. I would say more of, I would say, preventive controls rather than detective controls, and more of automated controls instead of manual controls. Your risk assessment process will take you to achieve automated systems through preventive controls. Again, stable HSE situation environment is going to be created, because one of the major risks which are threatening the organization is in terms of sustainability risk, which I will try to make a reference in the coming slide. Again, your financial impact risk benefits which probably might happen is improved working capital management, adhering to the credit policies, adhering to the credit limits, and your cash flow rotations, your regulatory compliances and corporate governance, which will definitely enhance your reputation in the market. It gives you a stable, I would say, platform for you to prevent frauds and I would say prevent, detect, and mitigate frauds. So immediately the warning signals are built into the system. Another benefit may be between the coordination between marketing and production, which is very crucial for any manufacturing operations. The gaps, either it will affect your marketing opportunities, and if production is not able to meet the marketing requirements, market is going to get affected. And if market is demanding certain things and production is not able to give you the required things, so again there is going to be a gap, and it's going to affect both the top line and the bottom line of the organization. Another benefits, improved IT management, including the data protection, data security, compliances. Another major threat, as I mentioned earlier, was the cyber security and cyber threats, which I will try to make a brief cover about those risks. And of course, revenue leakages, definitely going to be a big threat, big risk as far as the organization is concerned, how to protect their revenue leakages. And gives you a good risk assessment system, definitely gives you confidence to your internal and external stakeholders. It adds value to your vendor evaluation. It supports vendor evaluation measures adopted by the company. Again, it also has a very, very important bearing in respect of compliance of business responsibility and sustainability reporting, where all the stakeholders have to be evaluated, which a good ERM framework would support, I would say, a BRSR implementation. And the development succession, especially related to HR risk, subordinate development, developing second line, succession planning as far as the promoters are concerned, which often the organization run by families are getting exposed, also will be addressed. What are the basic, I would say, ingredients of setting up a risk management process, and how end-to-end process is going to be carried out? Formation of the committee, formation of the policy, and how the policies and procedures are going to be complied, identification and analysis, risk register, mitigation and monitoring, and the final assessment with the mitigation plans in play, which would be, I would say, end-to-end process of the risk assessment. How do we really approach the day one, as far as the risk management assessment is concerned, risk assessment is concerned? Broadly, I have highlighted around 5 steps One is the preliminary discussion with all the functional heads, understanding the risk governance structure, understanding the risk policy, understanding your board requirements, how the previous risk assessment process have been handled by the board or committees. Then current status assignment as is process have to be reviewed, and it has to be definitely done with help of functional heads and the discussions. And what are the, in case once I think the existing policies, procedures, and as is process is understood, we have to definitely look into the changes, and based on this we have to review the data, we have to apply the statistical I would say models, and the transactions reviews have to be taken, and the risk assessment broad, I would say the initial framework would be set up. Once the process is completed, what exactly you are going to deliver? Okay, one is of course improved robust risk policy and risk register, risk matrix, and the dashboard for the management to understand where they stand period after period, whether the risk factor has I would say turned bad to good or bad to worse. That the dashboards have to be given to the management. Mitigation plan, monitoring the mitigation plan, how the improvements are getting measured, monitored, and brought to the notice of the board by through a quarterly report or a half-yearly report as the management decides. And of course, once the initial framework is sent, once the basic risks are covered, then a little more detailed review of the potential or probability of fraud risk happening in the organization, and also cyber risk, how strong and how vulnerable the organization is exposed to cyber threats. How do we exactly, I think this aspect already, I think a lot of learned faculty have covered in the previous sessions. Even then, I will just make a reference how exactly the assessment, the risk score is measured. Two factors. One is likelihood, that is how frequently a particular transaction has happened, and whether we rate those likelihood of transactions on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 would be very rare and 5 would be very frequent. And this, the frequency or the likelihood has to be defined. Again, it depends on organization to organization, and this has to be defined. And significance. Fine. Once we have established, or once we have defined the likelihood and frequency of the activities happening, what is the significance? How it is going to impact my bottom line? Because the measurement is always in terms of the impact on the profitability. So wherever the financial measurements can be done, definitely it has to get evaluated in terms of profitability. And again, it is getting rated on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 is very incidental, nothing, absolutely zero significance, whereas the 5 would be, I would say, even more than the major, catastrophic. That is what the significance of such events going to impact the risk. The risk score is nothing but the multiplication of likelihood and significance. So again, in this we can have any defined range. I have taken an example of 5 to 10, 10 to 15, and above 15. So less than 5 is low, medium, high, and above 15 is the critical. So maximum, if you see, I would say 25 would be the worst risk score an organization can have for a particular risk. That is very frequent, which is 5, and the impact significance is 5, catastrophic. So 5 into 5, 25. 25 risk score means that particular activity is extremely critical, which organization has to immediately do something to mitigate that. This again based on the risk score. We have the profiling and how the risk matrix will look like. So, as I mentioned, analyze the likelihood of the risk based on the possibility of occurrence and the historical data. Derive the impact of risk, what can go wrong, and the likelihood and impact against each risk. Then we have the scores would get converted into a matrix, and the color code will be given: green, yellow, and red, maroon, whatever, I think, which normally is used to denote I would say the extent of risk exposure. This can be illustrative risk, can be anything. I think I have just I would say broadly I have categorized the risks, and again it depends on the industry to industry, and some of first I will probably take you through the general risks which any manufacturing organization would experience in various functions. Market, I would say market volatility of pricing, customer dependence. If your entire your revenue is depending on only if it is customer concentric and it is going to be geographically concentric, definitely there is going to be a risk factor attached to that. Competitors and client and dealer and distributor attrition. In case competitors are in a position to give you better terms, definitely this will affect your existing distribution network. Brand risk, failure of new products, maybe because of inadequate branding, are going to be some of the risks associated with marketing. Regulatory risk, again, all of us know, tax compliances, legal compliances, again, concentration, that is your anti-competition and dumping implications. Licensing, trademark, HSE implications, HSE implications. Operational, again, erosion of your margins. Leakages, revenue leakages, maybe through some fraudulent practices. Product integrity, I would say if your product is not in a position to meet the market requirements and it is not really meeting the requirements of consumer, definitely you are going to have an issue on that. Financial reporting risks, so many risks. I think it doesn't need any examples to explain this particular risk. Credit risk, yes, definitely all of us know what sort of the implications are going to be organization is facing as far as the credit risk are concerned. Business, adverse economic conditions, international risk, innovation risk, political risk, geopolitical risk, quality, insurance risk, and again, how about your business practices, whether it's going to have an impact on the reputation. We see so many, I think, news items almost every day, how various corporates are getting impacted and what sort of business practices are getting they are indulged into and what impact it has on the reputation. Coming to IT, yes, definitely your software license compliances, data security, breakdowns, disaster management initiatives, what the company is going to take, technology obsolescence, cyber threats, which again is I think is the subject by itself. And some of other risks which probably in the current context, I would just like to make a mention about sustainability risks, which again associated with your climate and other, in case the organization is not able to respond to environment, social and governance and climate change related risk. This is going to definitely affect the sustainability factor of the organization. Again, business strategic risk capital allocations, which has definitely, if your capitals are not properly getting allocated to your expansion initiatives or business initiatives. So these are some of the risks which are illustrative, which are definitely, I think, applicable to most of the manufacturing manufacturing segments. We also have very specific, I would say, sector-related risks. For example, if you take infra, you have the procurement risk because the project has to be funded, has to be supplied with the right materials at the right time, with the right quality at the right price. Otherwise, it's going to have the impact on the cost of the project. Timely delivery of materials. Again, the PO, the purchase procurement monitoring is going to be the key factor. Measurements, again, your project measurements and your execution, how it's going to take, how it's going to get measured, because the revenue billing is going to be done on the measurements progressive basis. So all these things have to be very critically monitored, otherwise it's going to have a direct impact on your revenue. Coming to healthcare, I think it's a again a unique, very unique sector where very difficult to define the framework of risks. Operations definitely have the risk impact as far as the clinical errors, safety issues, compliance, health and health regulatory compliances, inventories, medical and non-medical inventory, expired, the expired drugs is going to be a huge impact. You have a concept called patient satisfaction index, which definitely has to be very closely monitored by the healthcare segment to assess how exactly they are able to mitigate the risks. HR is going to be again having a huge impact on the healthcare because a lot of specialized workforce is required, and it's a big challenge for the healthcare segment for recruiting right people, retain and also plan succession for the specialist as far as the various I would say the specialized services are concerned. And again, you are going to have I would say the factor of fatigue, which definitely going to very seriously impact the healthcare segment, which all of us have seen for past 2 years how the healthcare segment is definitely getting impacted. And again, it's a big challenge as far as to take care of the environment management is concerned and to keep pace with the technology. And so these are some of I just wanted to share with you all the specific risks which are getting which have to be addressed for a particular segment when the assessment is going to be done. Just giving a broad, simple specimen of the risk register. We are going to have category-wise, entity-wise, function-wise, description, how the risk is getting measured, the score, which I mentioned earlier, like what is the likelihood score, what is the impact, what is the score, and how the preventive and mitigation are going to be taken, and whether the particular risk is going to have a financial impact or a non-financial impact. So these are some of the, we can always improve upon the disclosures as and when is required. So these are some of the, I would say the minimum disclosures which are required as far as the register is concerned. I was mentioning you the dashboard for the management. Once the risk register is compiled, risk score is computed, we can always translate this into a simple dashboard for the top management or the board to review. For example, critical risk 35%, high risk 30%, medium is around 20%, and 15% is the low risk. So it must be endeavor and emphasis of the management should be towards improving critical to high, high to medium, and medium to low. It's impossible. It's I definitely to have a zero risk, because business thrives on the risk. All of us know that. Just to take you through the specifics of fraud risk management as an add-on assessment for the risk, and again, right framework should be set up, and management should be in a position to identify what are the fraudulent areas which company is getting, and board and committee also. I think in some organizations I have seen they are asking the management to make specific presentation about the fraud controls, and because even auditors have to certify that there exists a very satisfactory system of identifying, preventing, and mitigating fraud, but organizations have to demonstrate by having a proper framework of fraud risk assessment. And anti-fraud and visual mechanism also some companies are definitely putting in place, and they're taking by taking the declarations, by taking the suitable disclosures as a part of ethics, employee ethics, and definitely it would create some sort of a moral obligation on part of employees to definitely adhere to proper, I would say, ethical practices. And again, the influence of external factors like both customers and vendors has to be very closely monitored, whether in terms of pricing, placing the orders, payments, everything, the complete what we see in IFC, procurement to payment and revenue to receivables. Both these factors have to be very closely monitored, and proper controls have to be put in place. Again, how to set up broad steps as far as setting up the framework is concerned, and management has to identify the potential fraud risk. Definitely, yes, we also will be in a position to help management to identify the high potential areas where it is getting exposed, it's becoming vulnerable to fraud, and how the controls are getting evaluated for efficiently preventing and also detecting the frauds. What are the impact of such fraud risks, both in terms of, normally the fraud risk has to have a financial impact, and I mean, how to have a mitigation plan mitigation plan of frauds in place once it is identified, once it is once management feels that there is always likelihood of fraud happening in a particular function. So they have to put the right framework in place. As I explained to you, automated preventive controls definitely is going to be a very, very important tool in setting up the fraud risk framework in the organization. Again, I'm not an expert in cyber risk management, but based on various practical issues, what I have seen in the cyber risk and the IT risks. So I just thought of sharing some of the inputs with the members. One is, again, huge risk now. I think especially all of us know that the work from home environment created such wide gaps as far as the IT network concerned, IT controls are concerned, and I think so many frauds, cyber threats, cyber security issues happening across. We have seen that. Normally it happens either through the network or through application, or what do you call the phishing and other how your network is going to be, whether it's strong or it's going to be vulnerable, and how it's really getting breached is going to be the issue. And again, information, data leakages, how the data is getting classified, how the confidential information is getting protected. Again, your data access permissions, remote work environment, data sharing and storage, all these things are going to be the potential cyber threats which an organization is getting exposed to. Some of the very basic safeguarding measures, of course, a lot of technical inputs are there. Basic, most of the organizations are now getting into what you call the VAPT test, vulnerability assessment and penetrative testing. What will be done in this particular process is, you must have heard about the ethical hacking. So your network is going to be ethically hacked and tested how strong your network, whether it's going to be giving access to each and everyone, what sort of firewalls are getting used, and how strong your network protects the external environment to get access to the company's data is one very important initiative which is definitely gaining a lot of momentum in the current context. Password change and the structure of the passwords, and not opening the attachments from unknown sources. So all these things we have seen, we have experienced, and we have been advised to follow all these measures. Okay, and probably I'm hopeful that the entire the discussions and the deliberations what we had useful, and I have shared my practical experiences working with various organizations. And thank you very much once again, Mr. Harith and other team members of committee members of the Ahmedabad branch, for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts. Thank you so much.
Shall I start? Harith? So, very good evening, everyone. I am Madhvi Trivedi, and today I will be taking you through another key development of LODR, which is business responsibility and sustainability reporting. Just a quick background as to why, how this came into being. So, as we all know, that worldwide the sustainability and climate change movement is gaining momentum, and it has made it incumbent upon companies to report their sustainability performance to stakeholders in line with global policies being adopted. So if we see how it came, this is an initiative towards ensuring that investors have access to standardized disclosures on environment, social, and governance parameters. So basically, we try that all investors and other stakeholders have access to the relevant information about sustainability and opportunities of companies for making better investment decisions. Sustainability reporting has moved from voluntary to mandatory reporting beyond the scope of mere furnishing disclosure requirements to exchanges. In line with global developments relating to climate change, SEBI has introduced improved sustainability comprising ESG parameters in annual reports. So whereas we all think that ESG and sustainability are more or less similar, there is a small difference. Sustainability is a broader term. It contains a lot of parameters on which make the environment sustainable. But ESG is a small subset which only relates to specific environment, social, and governance related issues for the organization. We will be covering this in detail in the slides to come. So globally, disclosures related to sustainability have been integrated with environment, safety, and governance norms. It helps organizations in better diversity, digital transformation, sharper insights, and stakeholders to have insights into the stability, growth, and sustainability along with financial performance. So it's basically all aimed towards worldwide measures being taken to save our planet, the carbon footprint, etc., which is becoming a concern across the world. So if we come to the regulatory perspective, so in Regulation 34, Sub-Regulation 2, existing clause F has been substituted with top 1,000 listed entities based on market capitalization. A business responsibility report describing initiatives taken by the listed entity from an environment, social, and governance perspective in the format by the board from time to time. 2, the requirement of submitting a business responsibility report shall be discontinued after the financial year 21-22, and thereafter, with effect from 22-23, the top 1,000 listed entities based on market capitalization shall submit a business responsibility and sustainability report in the format as specified by the board from time to time. And even during 21-22, top 1,000 entities may voluntarily submit the business responsibility and sustainability report, the BRSR. And the remaining listed entities, which are below the top 1,000, as well as securities on the SME exchange, may voluntarily submit reports. So what we see is, one, the scope has been enlarged from business responsibility reporting, that is BRR, to business responsibility and sustainability reporting, BRSR. We will see the differences in detail in slides to come. Secondly, as of now, it is mandatory only for top 1,000 listed entities based on market capitalization. But the intention is that eventually it will be mandatory for all entities going forward. So the journey we see of BRSR reporting from 2009, MC issued guidelines on CSR. In 2012, SEBI mandated top 1,000 listed entities to go ahead with the BRR. Then in 2014, CSR came into being. In 2015, there was a filing of BRR. So MCA has asked top 1,000 listed entities to file their reports. 2017, there was voluntary integrated reporting as part of BRR. 2019, filing of BRR extended to top 1,000 listed companies. And 2021, which is the latest amendment we are talking about, business responsibility and sustainability reporting. So now let us see what is the key elements of these reports. First of all, there is an integration of BRSR and ESG. So as we see, BRSR includes several ESG indicators. Now, environment issues. So just to give you a brief background, in November 18, MCA constituted a committee on business responsibility reporting to finalize BRR formats for unlisted companies based on the framework of national guidelines on responsible business conduct. Through this report, the Committee on Business Responsibility Reporting recommended that BRR be rechristened to BRSR, where disclosures are based more on ESG parameters, compelling organizations to holistically engage with stakeholders and go beyond the regulatory compliances in terms of business measures and reporting. With a growing trend of sustainability reporting, which has resulted in standardized frameworks globally being accepted, like the World Economic Forum Metrics, Value Reporting Foundation. So BRSR also incorporates several KPIs of international frameworks in order to bring it at par with global ESG reporting trends. So BRSR embraces ESG content in its disclosure formats. So if we see, some of the main environmental issues being addressed are emissions, waste, water conservation, solid waste management. You have 3R practices, which is research, recalibrate, report, sustainable sourcing, producer responsibility, life cycle assessment. Then there are social issues like employee well-being, health and safety of workers, training, human rights, social impact assessment, gender equality. There are governance issues like compliances, conflicts, whistleblower, anti-corruption, retention policies, remuneration policies, stakeholders engagement. So the Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs formulated BRSR on the basis of a study conducted in collaboration with the United Nations Children Fund, that is UNICEF. And the study concluded that though there were all these compliances were made more exhaustive. Coming to the disclosures, what are companies required to disclose? One, as we discussed, it is applicable to top 1,000 listed companies. Disclosure in annual report and MCA portal. Third is qualitative and quantitative disclosures. We'll be going through all these in detail in the slides to come. And fourth is general disclosure. So each report, BRSR report will have 3 parts. The first part will be general disclosures. Second part will be management and processes. And the third is principle-wise performance. What are the principles? First principle is business should conduct and govern themselves with integrity and in a manner that is ethical, transparent, and accountable. Second, business should provide goods and services in a manner that is sustainable and safe. Businesses should respect and promote the well-being of employees, including those in their value chain. Businesses should respect and make efforts to protect and restore the environment. Businesses should respect and promote human rights. They should respect interest and be responsive to all stakeholders. And when engaging and influencing public and regulatory policy, they should do it in a manner that is responsible and transparent. They should promote inclusive growth and sustainable, equitable development. The 9th principle is the business should engage and provide value to their consumers in a responsible manner. Now let us study each of these disclosures, whether it is the company general disclosure, management disclosure, or principle-wise disclosure with some illustrations for clarity. So what are the general disclosures? General disclosures are general information about the company. The first part of the BRSR report will be general disclosures, where you'll have the name of the company, year of registration, its address, its sectors, what are its key businesses, what is its policy on CSR, etc. Subsidiaries, associate companies. Section B is management and process disclosure. So what is it about? The management and process disclosure basically deals with what all policies and processes the management has in place to cover each of the BRSR principles. To what extent the manpower, the planning, the financial resources have been allocated for implementation of BRSR. The governance, leadership, and oversight to the names of the policies which have been approved by the board and the management, whether they are posted on the company's website. specific committees formed to oversee the implementation of these principles, review by the board and top management of the implementation of policies covering all these principles, the frequency of reviews by management for the board's alignment, the company's business alignment with the core principles of BRSR, stakeholder engagement, where all these would be a part of the management disclosure process, wherein to what extent, how your key stakeholders have been identified, what is your process for engaging with your key stakeholders, what is the frequency of engagement, how you are keeping them abreast of the company's BRSR initiatives, how do you float communications to the stakeholders, whether you are doing it through the website, press releases, stock exchange, investors conference, how you are doing it. And then comes section C, which is the principal wise performance. So the companies are required to report upon KPIs in alignment with the 9 principles of the National Guidelines on Responsible Business Conduct. This section classifies KPIs into 2 subcategories. One is essential indicators, second is leadership indicators. Essential indicators are mandatory. They include data on training programs, environment data on energy, emission, water, waste, social impact. Leadership indicators are voluntary. Voluntary, where companies are expected to comply with these indicators for better accountability and responsibility, like they include data on life cycle assessment, conflict management policy, additional data on biodiversity, breakup of energy consumptions, emissions, and supply chain disclosures. So although these are voluntarily currently, the intent of the law is to make this mandatory in the times to come. Coming on to the principle-wise disclosure, the first principle is ethics, transparency, and accountability. So here the businesses are expected to disclose the review by the governance, the board of directors, by the top management about the principles and core elements of these guidelines, what measures they have taken for creating awareness among stakeholders, how many of the, what percentage of the suppliers and distributors are covered by social and environmental audits, what was there a report on responsible business conduct, what are the number of complaints received by this NGRBC council, how many of those complaints have been resolved, or whether there were any disputes or fines imposed on your business. All this needs to be disclosed under the first principle of ethics, transparency, and accountability. Second principle is product life cycle sustainability. Now, essential indicators and leadership indicators among these should give disclosures about, top products of the company, how they have incorporated environmental and social concerns while considering the production cycle of their key goods and services, details of any investment in specific technologies that they have made to improve the social and environmental impacts, how they have taken measures to collect, reuse, recycle, dispose products at the end of life. All this needs to be mentioned as part of the second principle. The third principle relates to employee well-being. So the company needs to mention complaints received on cases of discrimination, how they have been resolved, what is the percentage of contract labor, the percentage of permanent employees, how many cases of child labor have been noted, whether these cases have been resolved, whether there are any cases of forced labor, involuntary labor, whether they have been resolved, whether your employees were paid as per minimum wages, what have you taken for employees' work-life balance, your leave policy, your company's accommodation for families, recreation policy, maternity leave, celebration of festivals, fun at workplace, picnics, all would form part of your work-life balance taken for employee well-being, number of complaints related to harassment that have been received and resolved, all whether employees have been trained on health and safety measures, what measures have been taken for skill upgradation. All these are part of the employee well-being measures being taken. The fourth policy is the policy on shareholders engagement. So the list of shareholders that have been identified, which are key to your business, you need to know whether they were formally informed and engaged in environment and social issues, whether you have listed out your vulnerable and marginalized shareholder groups, what measures have been taken in the interest of these vulnerable groups. For example, you might have some CSR activities which address these groups. You may have taken some educational measures, some well-being measures, all these in tribal areas, all these need to be mentioned under this principle. The next principle is the policy on human rights. So human rights, I think one slide is missing, but anyway, I'll take you all through. So there is a policy on human rights. What is the percentage of employees that have been provided training on human rights issue? What are the percentage of contract employees in your value chain? Employee categories covered by human rights policies, whether shareholders and other stakeholders have been made aware of the grievance mechanism, how many complaints have been received under the grievance mechanism, how have they been resolved, whether any human rights due diligence has been done. The sixth principle is on preservation of the environment. So whether the material risks of potential or adverse impacts upon the environment have been considered, whether the entity has carried out any environment impact assessment, whether the results of this assessment have been communicated in the public domain, what are the negative social impacts of business practices, what are the good practices that businesses have adopted, like reduction, recycling, reuse initiatives by the business, details of any adverse orders issued by the pollution control boards, how they have been addressed, any fines, penalties, etc. The seventh principle is responsible advocacy. So we need to review public policy advocacy positions by governance structure for consistency of the principles and these guidelines. Names of trade and industry chambers and associations that the companies are members of, details of any adverse orders for any anti-competitive conduct by the business, any monetary contributions that have been made to political parties. The next principle is that of inclusive growth and equitable development. So social impact assessments by the business, if any, they have been conducted. The business might carry out, periodic reviews to understand the social and economic value created in their CSR programs, community development programs. So all that needs to be reported here. Then they need to mention any products, technologies, or programs that combine the benefit for marginalized and vulnerable sections of the society. Some companies decide to procure a certain percentage from small and MSME vendors. So those kinds of initiatives can be mentioned here. The number of people benefiting from their CSR contribution, what all beneficial products or technologies have been launched, whose lives have been touched through the CSR projects, all that can be reported here. Then any grievances or complaints received from the local community, how it has been addressed, details of any investments made in regions which are underdeveloped, or any economic and social value addition to underdeveloped regions. There may be multiple, companies take up multiple projects in themes like agriculture, animal husbandry, education, vocational training, healthcare in the underdeveloped areas. So all that is part of this reporting. And of course, any adverse orders or judgments which any human rights institute has levied, and what resolution thereof has been done. Any measures which have been taken for betterment of educational and infrastructural amenities to the public at large also can be mentioned. The last principle pertains to customer value. So the adverse impact of any goods and services of our business has to be raised in public domain. So the main, first of all, if there are any adverse actions, second, any corrective actions that have been taken to reverse the adverse impact also needs to be mentioned. So one, you can list down, say for example, the goods and services for which you have mentioned the safe and responsible usage measures. For example, people display on their products that this product is entirely through recycled material or reused material. All those contribute in a big way to the customer value. The number of customer complaints received in respect of some data privacy, those resolved, any channels or platforms where information on goods or services can be accessed, any complaints in respect of product advertising, steps taken to educate the vulnerable and marginalized consumers about safe and responsible usage. So normally companies display their information regarding material safety measures that they have taken, on any other reuse, recycle measures that they have taken, for any sustainable procurement measures, eco-friendly measures that they have taken to reduce carbon footprint, etc. So these are some of the customer value measures that can be reported here. We come to sustainable development goals. So globally, the sustainable development goals have been linked to the BRSR initiatives. Sustainable development goals like which have been defined universally, like poverty eradication, eradication of hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, clean and green energy ecosystem, work environment, innovation and infrastructure, rational consumption and production, reduced inequalities in society, sustainable communities, responsible consumption and production climate, and public-private partnerships. So each of these principles, 9 principles of BRSR which we studied, are in one way or the other linked to the sustainable development goals. For example, poverty eradication and eradication of hunger are towards well-being of society, towards inclusive growth. So each of these are aligned with the principles that BRSR lays down. Now we come to the main changes in the new environment. First, we had business responsibility reporting. From April 22 onwards, these top 1,000 companies would be required to shift to business responsibility and sustainability reporting. So what are the key changes that have been made? One, the disclosures have been made more quantitative and specific. So earlier the disclosures were not too clear. Now the questions have become very simple, more specific, more quantitative. So they provide more specific details about the initiatives taken. Then there is segregation between essential and leadership indicators. So all these questions have been divided into mandatory and voluntary disclosures. However, as per the MCA committee report, I think in the short term for the next cycle of reviews, questions under the leadership category are likely to be shifted to the essential category to track the progress of disclosures and the transition. The third, there is a guidance note for population of the BRSR template. So the report, which includes a guidance note on the interpretation of each question or KPI, is readily accessible. Then there is information about the company's value chain and its stakeholders, which is required to be displayed. So what we see is in BRR, the UNICEF report revealed that information related to supply chain was among the weakest, and therefore in this BRSR update, several questions and disclosures related to the company's value chain have been incorporated. Then there is the introduction of BRSR Lite, where the committee report allows smaller unlisted companies below a certain threshold, which are currently not defined by SEBI, to adopt a lighter version of the format on a voluntary basis to make it easier for them to begin with for reporting on sustainability related issues. Then there is a disclosure on MCA portal in XBRL format. So basically the disclosures are in your annual report as well as on the MCA portal. Then there is an introduction of business responsibility and sustainability index. So basically the committee report envisions the development of a business responsibility and sustainability index to rate the responsible business conduct of an organization. These are the key improvements over the erstwhile BRR report. Now coming to the benefits of BRSR. So how does it help a company as well as its stakeholders? One, it helps better the company's performance. The top line growth through good sustainable practices is any day viewed as a better measure than practices which are not sustainable in the long term. Cost reductions through waste management, natural resource conservation, reuse, recycling, it has always helped in optimization of resources. Improvement in productivity through employee motivation. There is a lot of focus on upskilling employees, on employee well-being. So there is an improvement in productivity. There is an access to better quality resources. As far as the governance are concerned, the regulatory and corporate governance will be more streamlined, more ethical, more transparent. This will lead to an enhancement of investment opportunities because investors these days prefer investing in organizations which are more sustainable. Value enhancement to both internal and external stakeholders. We saw a lot of measures being taken for internal as well as external stakeholders in terms of their well-being, in terms of measures which were mutually beneficial to the company as well as its stakeholders. Reputation. So it leads to a stable health, safety, and environment situation. When you implement all these principles, which are environment friendly, employee friendly, stakeholders friendly, definitely there's a lot of stability in operations in the health, safety, and environment. There is a better visibility of the company through CSR initiatives, be it for educational purposes, for rural sanitation, for poverty eradication. There is a lot of visibility that the companies get through CSR initiatives. And confidence to internal and external stakeholders, which gives them better access to capital markets and increased market share. lot of importance globally as well as locally is being placed on implementation of BRSR in its true spirit, so that in the long term it is viable for the companies, for stakeholders, for the environment, and helps in conserving and preserving our resources. So this is a snapshot of the BRSR report, which is going to come into play from 1st April 2022. So there is not much time left for implementation as far as top 1,000 companies are concerned. But eventually the intent is to get it rolled out across all companies. So I've attempted to cover some of the technical and theoretical aspects of BRSR. Practical issues, as and when I think it gets rolled out, we will surely come across, and step by step, I'm sure there will be many more clarifications and guidelines, comprehensive guidelines coming out. Currently, BRR report also some gray areas which have been addressed in this BRSR reports, which we say have been made more specific and more implementable. So attempted to cover most of it in the available time. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. We have some 10 minutes to go, so any questions, any clarifications, we definitely would like it to be an interactive session. Any questions? Even later, if you all come across, please feel free to get in touch. And we would be happy to assist you in whatever way we can. Thank you so much, Haritji, and all the committee members for providing us with this opportunity to address our fraternity. I would like to conclude here.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Participants, if you're having query, question, okay. Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
On behalf of Ahmedabad branch of Ahmedabad branch of WRC, it's my privilege to propose a vote of thanks to both of you faculties. My heart feels with a lot of gratitude and respect for our eminent faculty, CA Nagarajan sir and CA Madhvi ma'am, for not only sparing their time, valuable time with us, but also enlightening us with their commendable talk on the subject, sharing with us their precious knowledge, and thank you for clearing our all of the doubts and clearing our enhancing our understanding pertaining to ERM and BRSS. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, LG.
Thank you.
Sir, I think so there is a query from.
Yeah, there is a query. So I was just typing out because I thought you gave the thank you section. So there is a query who says, how can a newly qualified CA enter into CSR and sustainability sector? So as of now, the BRSR is applicable on a mandatory basis only to top 1,000 listed entities. For all others, it is voluntary for unlisted entities, for SME exchange listed entities. Eventually, the intent of the committee is to make it mandatory across, because globally we see there is a lot of focus on environment sustainability, whether be it every day we read in the news about exhaustion of coal reserves, we read about the focus on shift to electric vehicles. So definitely the focus is there. As of now, in the first phase, they have asked the top 1,000 companies as a mandatory compliance, but eventually it will definitely be rolled out to smaller sectors. I hope that answers your question. Yeah, thank you. Any
You
more
can close-
questions?
We can close the screen.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, bye.
Bye.
Sorry, have you handed over, Kevin?
Yeah, yeah.
Or is this